Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I hope we will have a good conversation here today. We're going to focus on infrastructure. We've got a great panel. I'm Don DeLoach. I'm the managing partner of Rocket Wagon Venture Studios. I've been focused on IoT and this whole industry and fraternity of friends that I have developed over the years as a result of that. And I'm really happy to be here. Thanks especially to Jason Shepard and the team at Zadita. I'm actually at their offices here in California today. And it's great to be here. So with that, let's go around and let's start off with Abhay from India. Why don't you introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Hi, this is Abhay, and I'm part of HARMAN International, primarily focusing on the smart infrastructure. I've been in the industry since it was called M2M, and happy to have the discussion and fun today.
Great. Thanks. Ginger?
Hi, I'm Ginger Smith. Happy to be here. I do strategic partnerships within Honeywell's Connected Enterprise space. And essentially that is the software arm of Honeywell. So it really plays nicely in terms of IT, OT convergence and how we're leveraging the OT developments that have already happened.
Great. Thanks. And Matias?
Hi, everybody. I'm Matias Klein. I am the co-founder and CEO of Kognition. We are a developer of an enterprise AI that transforms buildings into smart buildings, really taking a software-defined approach to taking the legacy infrastructure, wrapping it with AI software, and then allowing AI to increase the level of safety, security, and automation in your facility. So pleased to be here.
Great, thanks. And Peter.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, Peter Torrelas. I'm with Siemens, a partner at Siemens Advanta. We specialize in smart cities, so I'm responsible for the America and then globally for our smart city and smart building practice. So that's also Europe and EMEA. And I've been with Siemens for 20 years and been in the infrastructure space the entire time, so excited to share what we've learned over time with the panel here.
Great. And so I'm going to stick with Peter and ask, let's get this started by talking about the state and the direction of innovation in the infrastructure space and more narrowly in smart buildings. But Peter, let's start with you and talk about infrastructure. What do you think, what would be your observations about kind of the current state and direction of the market?
I would say, to use a metaphor, we often talk about the built infrastructure, the physical infrastructure being humanity's user interface to the planet. And we are upgrading that user interface. And we are, I would say, in the beginning of that upgrade. We've been at it for quite a while. And I think if you look at different asset classes like water or energy grids or buildings, you'll find different levels of maturity and different levels of adoption. You also have in this space both public and private asset owners, and public and private asset owners deal with their assets differently. So that old quote, "The future is here, not evenly distributed," is certainly true in infrastructure. And I think to get into the smart building space specifically, I would say that asset class is the most exciting and dynamic right now. People's relationship to buildings, to space, to office space, to recreational space, obviously with the pandemic has been completely transformed. And at the heart of that transformation is digitalization. So we're seeing software and AI and the stuff that that Honeywell's doing and Cognizant's doing and HARMAN and Siemens and many other firms. It's exploding, and we're also figuring out how to do that from a business perspective. So there's a side of it which is all of this cool stuff that we have, and there's a side of it which is what is somebody willing to pay for, and what can we deploy at scale. And you're seeing a real convergence, I think, in those areas.
All right, great. So staying on smart buildings, Matias, you want to talk about your views here?
Well, I mean, I think Peter nailed it. I mean, I talk often to partners and investors saying that the smart building, the digital transformation of buildings into smart buildings is in the first inning, maybe even the pregame, which is an exciting place to be because I like that analogy. We're upgrading the user interface. I feel like in a lot of ways, this movement from analog to digital in smart buildings unlocks really a huge number of different opportunities. As we think about, this digital transformation and how you apply AI to creating real business value, right? Because that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? When you want to know what someone will pay for something, you have to be able to answer the question of what is the return on investment for delivering this to you. And so when you look at digital transformation of smart buildings, there's safety, there's security, there's customer experience, there's logistics, there's energy efficiency, and the list goes on, right? So there's a very large number of use cases that are going to be able to be automated by using a integration of IoT, AI, machine learning, and other techniques really to create this new capability, which when you look at it is going to create spaces that are more pleasant spaces to be in, places that are fun, places that are safe, places that are secure. And I think those are places people are going to want to be in the future.
Okay, great. Ginger, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the team has it nailed. There's a big, we've kind of excelled in terms of IT as far as the evolution goes. We've excelled in terms of where OT evolution is going, and now it's how do we make it better by leveraging the edge and all of these IoT opportunities. As Peter called out before, COVID's been a big changer. So how are you utilizing your space? The building's not going anywhere. How can you make it smarter with or without all the people that were previously there? And I think I would just echo the sustainability front that Matias raised. That is growing not just in terms of people demanding it or regulations that are putting in place, but also the cost savings and the ROI that come out of it. And how do you not just report up on those metrics for carbon emissions, but how do you make it as sustainable and energy focused as possible?
Right. I want to come back to that in a minute because there's a thread there. Abhay, we're talking about buildings and infrastructure, but infrastructure is much more than just buildings. And I know that you have your hand in dimensions that go beyond the buildings. Do you want to talk about your views?
Yeah, sure. So the state today that I see is that almost there are heterogeneous systems. I mean, if you take any building, you will see that there are subsystems, whether it is HVAC control or lighting control. Almost they are working independently. So there is a great deal of opportunity to integrate those isolated networks or systems. Secondly, there is a lot of data available with the customers, but they are facing challenges in terms of how do you make use of that data or how do you make sense of that data. That's where we see the opportunities. Obviously, the other challenge that I see is that there are a lot of aging infrastructures as well. So how do we make the new solution compatible with the existing infrastructure, which could be aging, and compatible with that? So that's something that I see a great opportunity there.
Great. Okay, so we talked about ROI and investment, and I want to bring up a specific element that has evolved over the last few years, and then one that is also evolving, and just explore this a little bit. So when we think of buildings, I think everybody is familiar with the whole LEED standard. But when it first came out, I think that there was a reluctance because developers were saying, why do I want to spend all this money? I'm not going to really get anything out of it. And I'm not an environmentalist, so I'm a developer and I just want, to make money. But I think that we've seen that the data would support that the LEED buildings, while being much more forward-looking in terms of sustainability and resilience, are also have higher occupancy rates, get higher rental rates, and in the end, it actually is a viable economic proposition as well. So let's talk for a second about the trade-offs in terms of the type of investment we want to do and why that investment makes sense, and what some of the other considerations are. I mean, some of these investments may make sense 30 years out, but we live in a world that's quarterly driven, so that's some of the trade-offs we have to deal with. So how should we be thinking about investing in the infrastructure, investing in smart buildings, in the context of the economic considerations? And I'll throw it out to whoever wants to answer.
I'll jump in. I love that question. At the end of the day, I think Ginger pretty much nailed it when she's talking about sustainability, right? I mean, this all comes down to sustainable economic value creation, right? And when you look at buildings, they are the largest polluter, period, right? I mean, they create so much greenhouse gas. When you look at the threats that people face when they go to spaces, whether they're shopping malls or the office, they're dealing with things like the spread of disease. They're dealing with potentially, hopefully not active shooters, right? They may be dealing with, in the corporate setting, espionage or hackers or thieves trying to steal stuff. So it becomes really troubling, right? When you think about the spaces we have and the kind of how we want to make them spaces that are truly sustainable in health, sustainable in energy use, right? Sustainable in their security and safety profiles. And I think when you have an asset that has all of those core items embodied in it, right, then it's a more valuable asset. It will have a higher resale value. It will have a lower operating cost, more profitability if it's a commercial real estate offering, and that doesn't even take into account a lot of the intangibles that are very hard to measure and hard to tie ROI to. So, for example, if you do avoid an active shooter event, what is the cascading liability deflection that occurred? Right? You didn't occur. How do you measure that you didn't have one? It's like these really tough ROI calculations. But when you look at having a building that's safe, that's more energy efficient, it's more appealing, it's more valuable. Tenants want to be there. I think, Don, that reflects why the LEED buildings have higher occupancy at the end of the day. So a smart building is a more attractive building. It's a more valuable building. It's a building that is really more sustainable.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would add on that a bit. Take a slightly different lens. I agree with Matias. So smart buildings, part of the investment decision is going to be about the tech stack. And a lot of times you have companies that have multiple buildings, green, brown, they're putting them all together and they're trying to have different systems talk to one another, but you end up with these data silos, which feeds into the IT OT side of the house. So if you're investing in smart buildings, I think recognizing how full and robust that tech stack is, and if you can have that extensibility, not have to rip and replace, as Abhay said, but really just feed in and fully integrate all these systems that are historical or new that you're looking at for these sustainable advantages. And on the flip side, one of the things that I've seen quite a lot of is now, whether it's a building restructuring, retrofitting, or actually acquiring new buildings, you have these larger stakeholders deciding whether or not to purchase. And it's not just the real estate or the facility managers, it's also HR, it's IT, it's the COO, it's all these different people that have the attraction of new talent or retention, or being able to tell that their employees are safe because the indoor air quality is appropriate. So I think there's a lot of different costs, and just making sure it aligns with strategy, not just for the person that's managing it, but also for all the other groups involved, is really important for those investment decisions.
Okay. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but if you unpack what you just said, and I'm going to play this back, and if I get this wrong, tell me I'm getting it wrong, and that's perfectly fine. But what you just described is an environment with numerous constituencies that all have stakes and interest in not only the facility but the systems and the data associated with how this exists. And if you broaden it out to a city, that gets even bigger in terms of now you've got lighting systems, you've got the interaction with mobility. Doesn't that raise an issue regarding data governance, not only privacy, but if you separate the creation of the data from the consumption of the data, any given piece of atomic data may exist in 10 or 100 or 1,000 different instances with people consuming that data for a variety of reasons. How do you arbitrate that? How should we be approaching the curation and the stewardship of that data when it comes to pulling these systems together and optimizing, like you're talking about? I realize that's a kind of a loaded question, but what are your thoughts?
So I think
go ahead.
I was just quickly add, there's obviously a lot of opinions here. What I tend to say is the use of anonymous data to try to skirt some of these data privacy concerns. But I think another interesting metaphor or parallel would be what we're seeing, not necessarily from an infrastructure standpoint, but more of an individual company building would be what we're seeing with vaccinations. Companies are making decisions about whether or not employees need to be vaccinated to be at a site or to work at the company. You could say the same thing as long as they're transparent about what data they're collecting and how they're ultimately using that within the company as a whole.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I think definitely the ownership of data needs to be clearly defined. On the other hand, in order to make this data available, I think there is a need to have a standardization. How do I access that data in a uniform way? And there is a need to model the building information or the smart city information such that it can be accessed by the owners in a uniform way. That will help a lot.
Okay. And then from a plumbing standpoint, how do you, and you're all involved in the instrumentation of these assets, whether they're building or broader infrastructure. What are some of the challenges associated with putting this technology into these buildings, into this infrastructure, and then having it coexist with other systems and the integration?
Well, I'll jump in real quick with a couple cents of opinion here. But, basically, if you think about the number of different systems, different vendors that could coexist within a smart building, and even more so within a smart city, right, interoperability becomes absolutely critical. And so I think, that's one piece, is like, how do you bring it together? One of the things that, in terms of our approach, not saying that we have the only approach or the necessarily the right one, but our view of how to solve for this is that you need a software-defined open systems architecture, right? So you can plug in to new and legacy systems, to whatever vendors are part of that ecosystem. And then what you need to focus on is the implementation of the business rules, the standard operating procedures, the corporate governance policies in the software layer, right? Because that's the layer that is mediating the data fusion of all the stuff in the smart space. And with that software-defined architecture, right, you can basically begin to address some of the concerns people would have around data governance, privacy and data retention, and I think, cybersecurity and consistency. I think a big problem with a lot of these kind of systems is, oh yeah, I can stitch this together with this, and I'll use kind of if then that kind of routine, and that's simple, but it doesn't really stand up to corporate security policies, right? It doesn't stand up to audit and control that's needed in highly regulated industry. So when you start to think about doing these things in mission critical environments, in highly regulated verticals, they need a very robust tool for managing this type of intelligence being manifest in space. There are cybersecurity concerns. There are privacy concerns. But I think, kind of as Ginger was saying, transparency, and we think opt-in, and then giving the controls to the person that runs the space, whether that's the building owner or the operator or the corporation. They need to be able to implement the policies and procedures that are appropriate to their organization and to the regulatory environment they operate in, whatever jurisdiction they're in. And so giving those controls in software to manage it at kind of a higher level abstraction from the lower level devices, I think that's, to me, it seems like a good way to do it. And that's the way we are approaching it at Kognition.
And do you think that the users in the market are coming to grips with how that's going to work and embracing that?
Well, look, I mean, Peter, he had a great quote about the future is not evenly distributed, right? But it is here now. And so I think that's exactly right. And so it depends on who you're talking to, right? There are people that are very advanced, doing incredible things, at the highest level of interoperability and integration in cybersecurity. And then there's the mainstream market that's going, is there even a game going on, right? But yeah, we're in the first inning. So I think a lot of thought leadership is necessary, right? I think evangelical kind of product marketing to get that information out there into the marketplace is very, very important right now, because I think a lot of the market doesn't have a good mental model for how to think about the scope of the problem and how they want to go about solving it as they move forward.
Okay. Peter, so when we talk about infrastructure and we start to look at things like energy supply and water supply, now you're taking a problem set that's kind of on a more grand scale. And I know you have a pretty robust background in dealing with those type of systems. What do you think some of the biggest challenges are that we're facing today as we move towards a more and more instrumented infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty low tech stuff that part of being in the first inning or the pregame, or I don't know, maybe we're running drills, I don't know, is we're dealing with those basic things. So, and I'll stick with buildings for a minute, but you could apply it to a lot of stuff. You have different ways of defining data. So just super simple stuff. A building is a building, and a building has a window, and there's a floor, and if you were to express that mathematically in a piece of software, you would need a language to do that in. And there isn't a language. There's a bunch of languages. Forget standards, right? Just a picture of, is it brick or haystack? Those are different languages. Which language do you need for which phase of construction? So there's this idea of bim, bam, boom. So you need stuff before you build a building. You need stuff to operate and assemble a building. And so just the basic models of how do we call a building and how do we call a window, we're still there. There's a lot of progress being made, but I think it would be naive to declare that problem solved. And if you look into the energy space, I still think some of those challenges are there. If you look at generation and transmission and distribution, you're talking about incredibly large networks. And, if you look at water, you'll see use cases where you have like robots going through pipes and detecting leaks. That's true. The other truth is we're still leaking 20 to 40% of the water globally that we're cleaning before it gets anywhere, because we don't have the data to know where to dig in the ground to go stop the leak or that the leak is coming. We have the science to be able to find it, but it's certainly not instrumented yet. And so on the one hand, that means that we have incredible challenges ahead of us. But the most important thing is the opportunity, the headroom for innovation, for capital allocation, for collaborations, for ecosystems, for us just to get better at this stuff is incredible. And the hallmark of that is not how cool our stuff is, but that you have institutional investors and capital markets saying this is important. How to standardize data, how to create a distributed ledger so I know the provenance and the pedigree of every byte of data so it can feed a financial model so somebody can say that's good or bad or clean or dirty or whatever that is. That's happening right now. There are hyperscalers and institutional banks that are working on distributed ledger standards for infrastructure. That's right now. Is the policy and the rulemaking there? Not yet, but it's one thing has to happen before the other thing happens. So there's a product that people want to buy and they're willing to pay more for it. The markets are emerging. There's institutional capital markets that are moving towards supporting and preferencing and having a bias for this product. So there's an incentive and there's a business case for it. There's the people who just want it. Buildings don't use themselves. Water doesn't drink itself, right? So there's this ecosystem that's participating. But how hard is it to put sensors everywhere? Really hard. How good are we at doing that? We're pretty good. Lot of work, a lot of opportunity, a lot of money to be made, lot of progress to be made in terms of climate action, reporting. I think ESG, resiliency, those are things that are not just intellectual agreements anymore. They're real businesses with real technologies and real customers and real clients, people paying real money, and we're starting to see things move. So even though we're at the beginning, the convergence of the stuff that's really important to actually create a market is now there for the first time in a way that it hasn't been before. And I think that's super exciting.
I agree. And I guess one of the things I'm hearing you say amid all that is that it's not just having the data, it's having data that you can trust, that multi-parties can trust and make decisions on, because people are coming together. And as my good friend Chris Resendez always says, you know, people talk about data being the new oil, but his view is trusted data is the new oxygen. You can live without oil for a while, but you can't really live without oxygen very long. So
yeah, and I think that's a great example. I mean, Spherical Analytics is doing incredible work, right? And, you know, that's a team in Cambridge. And, you know, you have these innovators, startups and grown-ups working together to solve this incredible problem.
Right.
And I think those are the examples that really show us there's something really special here. But we're at the beginning of it.
Yeah. Totally agree. So when we talk about the extension of the infrastructure, you can't really talk about where we're going without looking at the transportation sector and how that adds a dimension and a level of complexity to what we're dealing with. Abhay, do you want to comment on, you know, your thoughts on where transportation is and the directions there in the context of our evolving infrastructure?
Yes. So from the transportation side, I think what we have seen is that the basic information that a traveler needs, for example, is there, but it is again not unified. There is again heterogeneous information or isolated information that needs to be integrated. And second thing is the mobility aspect and efficiency of the communication, whether it is vehicle to infrastructure or vehicle to vehicle. That's where I see that there is a lot of opportunity, moving forward. Especially when we talk about the smart city areas where you want to implement some of the new use cases, like for example, the accident avoidance or safety, public safety. That's where I see that there is an opportunity where you need a better communication and infrastructure to support the vehicle to infrastructure, for example, supported for new generation use cases.
Great. Let me pivot just a tiny bit. This came up a little bit before, but I want to ask it of everybody. How big of a deal is security right now from a cybersecurity standpoint? And do you think the industry is doing what it needs to be doing to deal with it, or do we have a ways to go? Abhay, let's start with you.
Yes, I think it's a very vast topic, and there are a lot of opportunities. Still, I see that still we are in infancy from basic secure communication or authentication of people, places, things, to how do I trust the supply chain, whatever, for example, the material that I'm getting, whether it is in terms of software or hardware, how do I trust that piece of software, and how do I make sure that there are no vulnerabilities? So there are a lot of opportunities. Second thing, security is not just one-time job. It is a continuous activity where you need to continuously monitor the state of the health, whether discovering new vulnerabilities. And we see that there is a lot of opportunity for identifying the newer vulnerabilities using AI, and by collecting the data, detecting the anomalies, you can find out if there is something unusual happening. And I think that's the area where I see a lot of opportunity moving forward.
Okay. Ginger, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think last year and this year, safety and security for smart buildings is the #1 largest growing element in terms of where people are investing, and for good reason. I guess I'm most excited about, I think there's still room to grow, but we've been doing a lot of demos with different cybersecurity providers that they've quickly evolved, because you have this startup mentality and then you partner it together with a larger player like Honeywell. It just makes a lot of sense to fill those small gaps in the roadmap. So I think we'll continue to see things, and it's rare to have any sort of smart building conversation without the safety and security side of the coin as well.
Right. Matias, any thoughts?
Well, I would just add that, in my view, and I know the view of my investors, is that, security is highly undervalued, in that, our world is not becoming more secure, it's becoming more chaotic and more insecure. And so while, it used to be kind of a cliche to say, oh, I don't even lock my door, like that's a luxury. And I think people are recognizing that the workplace needs to be safe, it needs to be secure. Our public spaces need to be safe and secure. And we have a very complex threat landscape, right? You talked about cybersecurity, but I think, we have moved into this kind of zero trust world. And now your employee is potentially an insider threat. And so all of the kind of perimeter protection that we've done to harden, us on the outside has been important. But as you think about, how we monitor inside of our spaces for this kind of insidious threat that really is undetectable using previous generations of technology. So I think, when you look at what we call cyber physical security, which is the convergence of physical security intelligence with cyber security intelligence, we think that's going to be a super white hot space. Absolutely.
Okay. And Peter, thoughts?
I think you'd be surprised how many people think keeping a computer in a closet and not connecting it to anything is a pretty good answer to having it be secure. And how much of those computers in those closets run stuff that's really important in buildings, in water and transportation. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have zero trust policies. And in the infrastructure space, those two things are coming together. So part of your question is like, how well are we handling that? I think we're handling it really well. I think, we have ecosystems at Siemens. We have a charter of trust, some major organizations coming together to standardize on responsible innovation, ethical innovation, cyber secure supply chains. You still have boxes and closets. And when you let them out into the world, a world they were not designed to be in, you have challenges. And so I think we're at the beginning of that process, but we're going to get over that. But you're just asking, like, where do we land on that? Two very different places that are coming together.
Well, I think what's really interesting, Peter, is that actually I think creates a huge new opportunity, because it's a big problem, right? When you think about those computers in the IDF closet, right, that a guy's got a key card to be able to access, but the key card could be stolen and it looks like a valid access, or someone could piggyback in, we wouldn't even know that person was in there. Those areas, I think, are soft targets of opportunity for this new generation of capability. And I think people are going to say, look, if I don't have this type of security, automated, low cost, automated intelligence security on these soft targets, perhaps it's irresponsible, right? Maybe even negligent.
Yeah. So we have just a few minutes left here. Let me ask everybody one sort of last question, and that is, let's say we're all back together 2 years from now, and we're looking back on the progress we made over the last 2 years. How do you think that would be described? What do you think are the key things that we can that the industry can accomplish over the next couple of years that are realistic? Abhay, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see is that the model of using the infrastructure is changing, and like a Uber service, you are looking at workplace as a service, and I think that is something from the smart building perspective I see definitely possibility, and already see some of the initiatives that we have where we are marching towards that, and all those things that we discussed about, whether it is security or sustainability, becomes the ownership of the developer, and where you get out of the box, solution to the tenant, and that's where I see from the building perspective definitely, achievable.
Okay, thanks, Ginger.
Yeah, so I guess taking a slightly different lens, I would like to see us discussing more of that mobile applicability where buildings in the industrial space, we've evolved enough that we're closer to how our private lives and our consumerism trends tend to be in terms of using your phone when an autonomous system can't handle something. You can easily manage it from the comfort of your own home or a coffee shop, wherever the case may be, related to all aspects of your buildings, whether it's elevators or fire systems or your water usage, etc. And one quick plug I do want to make is around metaverse. So I know that Facebook had a big announcement 2 months ago. We're already doing things in terms of digital twins now. I would love to see how far we've come in 2 years. I don't think it's that far off in terms of future investments. So that would be my encouragement.
Okay, thanks. Matias?
Well, I personally think that in 2 years from now, we'll all be looking back and be surprised at the significant growth that we saw in 5G edge apps for smart spaces and for the digital transformation of smart spaces. I think that what we're seeing right now, and certainly stuff that we're working on, is taking capabilities that have been available, right? I think we talked about technologies out there; it's available, but a big issue with adoption of technology is how easy is it to use? How easy is it to deploy? And I think the combination of 5G edge technologies, one-click deployment of these really smart software modules that will be able to rapidly transform spaces, I think that's going to create a lot of value in a lot of different use cases, mind you, right? Not just in one pocket, not just in security or safety, but in a lot of smart spaces areas. And I think we're going to see enormous growth there. I think it's going to surprise a lot of people because of how easy it will be, how inexpensive it will be, and how quickly the ROI will start to accrue to people that start deploying these things.
Oh, that's great. Thanks. And Peter?
Well, I hope we're celebrating Matias's IPO by then.
It's a SPAC. It'll be a SPAC.
But whatever exit he is aspiring to. I think what I look forward to is celebrating all of the community benefit, right? So we're not solving tech problems and adoption problems and business case problems, but we're saying, thank goodness that we had those conversations and we moved forward, and because of digital twins or AI, the new infrastructure has supported a mass adoption of fleet electrification, which could only have been done with the technology necessary on the energy grid and on the building side coming together with the transportation network. And of course, all the water that you need to power all this. And so I really see something for how it impacts our lives in a positive way. And technology is going to be there to enable that and these communities that we live in. And so I'd love to be on a panel where we're talking about how all the cool stuff that we're making made millions and millions of people's lives better in quantifiable ways.
Right on. Love it.
Great response. So with that, I'm in the last 20 seconds here. My view would be similar, Peter, to what you said. And I'm going to use one quick illustration, and that is when we think about COVID, one of the technologies that has evolved is wastewater-based epidemiology, where you can do early detection of pathogens, based on sampling of wastewater. And if you think about the progression of technology, the time is going to come where that type of testing can be sort of in situ in the plumbing, where you're doing constant analysis. And and this is like the second machine age, the book by McAfee and Jolson, where what we're really dealing with is the combinatorial elements of technology that are being used in creative ways that are increasing the pace of adoption of digital transformation. And Peter, it's like a lot of the things you just talked about. And I think that while, and this is just a personal view too, but I think that while the opportunity for massive, wealth creation and capitalistic ambition is all good, and it is good, I think the ability to actually make a difference in the world with some of these technologies is becoming clearer and clearer. And I just echo what you said. And I hope we do see that type of result by applying this technology in more and more creative ways and in more and more combinations. So with that, I know we're at the end of our session. I want to thank Abhay, Ginger, Matias, and Peter for taking part. Thanks to Zadita for hosting this. We've enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a great day. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Don. Thank you.
Thank you.